up on Actua's screen, two brilliant youngsters will help me to exhaustively interview two members of the European Parliament, Mr. Elmar Brok from Germany and Mr. Joao Pimenta Lopas from Portugal. What concerns them the most, the consequences of a Brexit on Europe's foreign affairs, the human rights of refugee women, the poverty across Europe, and the results after the set of the EU-Turkey deal. Stay tuned to find out more. This is Chara Gkioka. Welcome to ActuaTV. Joining me to this episode, two members of the European Parliament. Mr. Elmar Brok from Germany is registered with Christian Democrats in the European Parliament here and is the chairman of the Committee on Foreign Affairs. Welcome. Mr. Pimenta Lopas is registered with the Confederal Group of European United Left, is a member of the Committee on Employment and a member of the Committee on Women's Rights. Welcome. Thank you. I have to say, I'm deeply moved. I have a male politician that actually is in the Committee of Women's Rights.
Not the only one.
Not the only one, hopefully. And as I promised, two young students. We have Anton, he's 22 years old, is studying social work.
Social work, yes.
And we have Joke.
Yes.
Am I pronouncing your name right?
Almost.
Almost, okay.
Very good.
Is currently working in the House of Europe.
Europe House, Rijkenvelde, yes. It's a Flemish organization.
And to begin with, please, Anton, would you like to start with your first question?
The first question is about poverty. It is not only a problem that affects third world countries, but also is a major problem in Europe. So the question is, what can and will Europe do in the future to help people in poverty, help them to get more working rights or more jobs?
This is actually a challenge. I have to say on top of his question, that is a huge challenge for Europe because the 70.2% of the European population actually has a poor income. And on top of this number comes the 10.2% that actually reflects the unemployment in the EU of 28. So may we please have your answer?
The problem of poverty in the European Union at 28 is a huge problem, a massive problem. We now account for a fourth of the population in the European 28 at risk of poverty. And this is after the pensions have been paid. So we can see that one in each four European citizens is at risk of poverty. For us, this is a problem that is linked directly with the policies, of course, that have been implemented throughout the last decades. The problem of poverty is an increasing one, not a decreasing. For instance, we have many times in the Parliament the reference to the Europe 2020 strategy as a means to reduce it. One thing that we are saying is that when you set a goal to reduce in 20 million, which is the goal that is set in the Europe 2020 strategy, the number of people in Europe, that is a very short-minded goal. Because this would mean, if we were to achieve it, which we are not, that by that time, by 2020, we would still have 100 million poor in Europe. This, of course, is the result of the policies that of deregulation of work, of increasing precariousness in work, of the reduction even of the value of work. In many countries we have witnessed the reduction of the actual value of work throughout the years. And this, one must also see this also on the avertance of the difference of wealth distribution, which is also, the gap is also widening. There are more rich with more wealth, and the number of poor that are increasing is overwhelming, and they are more poor than we were 10 or 20 years ago.
Yoko, would you like please to keep up with your next question?
Yes, it's about deal the EU made with Turkey. And at the moment, the EU is even making other similar deals with other African countries to solve the refugee crisis. And related to this topic, I have 3 questions. And I was wondering, how efficient has this deal been so far when it comes to results? Has Turkey been a trustworthy partner, and are human rights being respected? Because that's one of the reasons why it has been so controversial.
Turkey until now has done more for refugees than Europe. Turkey is host of 3 million refugees since several years. We have cities in southern Turkey where 20–30% of the population are Syrian refugees. And I think that it's very good to have an agreement with them that we are able to support these refugees with the 6 billion euros, that they get schooling, that they get medical service, that they get food. European countries have decreased their support for the food program of the United Nations in that part by 40% on average for the last year. Now Europe tries to solve that again. And secondly is we have to fight smugglers who send people on such boats to the sea where they drank and where we can only try to save them, but not all of them can be saved. And also to help the refugees is to help them with money in their part and help them in the way that these human traffickers cannot play their business anymore. And this part of the deal until now Turkey is accepting and doing. We have not 10,000 people per day on the sea, 50 only. That is a huge progress both for us and for the refugees and for Turkey to have a fair burden sharing. The situation in Turkey with human rights on that, here we have to criticize. Turkey is not able to join the European Parliament. So long they have this Kurdish policy, so long they have such failures in the rule of law, in the right of freedom of expression, the freedom of religions and all that question. But we have to divide that. And this we have to discuss also with other countries who have refugees. It doesn't matter which systems are there. We have to look for the future of the refugees. That means that we have to find an agreement with Libya, which is very difficult, where the Islamic State has taken over the smuggler business. And this is an incredible way just to send people out for 1,200 euros per person on such boats, hoping that the European Union will find them and save their lives. I think we have to end such a situation. But the most important points are 2. First is we have to be stronger with others to stop the war in the Middle East and overcome the development problems in Africa.
Mr. Brok, you recently had a meeting with Mr. Demirtas, the co-leader of the People's Democratic Party in Turkey. May you please just transfer the environment, in which mood that meeting was?
I think it was in a good mood. We know each other since a long time, and we have a good working relationship, and I support him in his situation that this way not accepting or destroying his immunity is the point which we cannot accept in the European Union, and I gave him another time the support in this issue.
Thank you. Anton, would you like to keep up with your next question, please?
Well, the news that is dominating the news now is the Brexit, the possible Brexit. So my wonder is, in what way can that affect Europe's foreign affairs? In what way will that change the voice that Europe has now in the world?
You're asking Mr. Brok, I guess?
Yes.
Yes.
Brexit would be a disaster for the European Union, but even more for Britain. It's, if it would happen, this decision based on emotions, not on facts, it would mean a lot of more unemployed people in Britain because of several reasons that it's very clear. It would weaken Europe, for example, in a fight against migration, in a fight against these smugglers, and the situation we have failed to solve the problems of the refugees. It will not be helpful to defend liberty, freedom, if I look to the Ukraine, and therefore I think it's economically and politically a disaster, and I fear that then others will try to do the same with referendum member states, and that might be an end in a certain way of this room of peace and freedom which we have developed in the last 70 years. So it's a danger for the future of Europe.
Would you like to keep up with your final question, I guess?
Yes, for you, Mr. Pimenta Lopas. It's about women's rights, and especially about those of refugee women. because they are very vulnerable, also when they're on the road to Europe, but also within the EU in the refugee centers. And I was wondering if the EU is trying to protect the rights and well, to protect these women when they're on the road and within the EU, and how the EU does that.
We know that the gender issue that exists not only in the situation of refugees but also in Europe and well, all across the world, and women tend to be the weakest link in this equality or inequality, which also, as we were talking about poverty a while ago, inequalities between men and women also have widened, and so this also reflects the situation on the migration crisis. But we must say that the EU policies are also responsible for these situations. The European Union-Turkey deal, the externalization of borders, the militarization of the conflict with NATO in the Aegean, the closure of borders, even changes to the Schengen rule. So I was referring, of course, to the responsibility of the European Union. For instance, I'll recall a conference that was held in the Parliament with the FAM committee on the 8th of March, which was precisely on refugees. One of the problems that was being mentioned is that you don't even, for some of the cultures that are arriving to Europe, it is unbearable for a woman to be checked by a man doctor. And this, such a simple thing that could be done in the reception centers, is not being accomplished. So when the European Union is not attending to actually the specificities even of the cultures that are arriving in Union, we can see for real what is the response, the actual response or the non-response of the European Union to this problem.
Well, I have to sincerely thank you, all of you. See you next week.